Welcome back to News Hub Extra this beautiful Saturday morning. I hope you are having a good time here with us so far. And we'll be going right into our first discussion, which by all means it's a political discourse. Now, you would agree with me, during the headlines, we spoke extensively of several meetings that were held in London, faraway London. The base has shifted from Dubai to London, and perhaps maybe in a few years from now, it's going to shift to some other.
When are we going for our own talk?
Well,
we need to travel out and go do our own meeting as well.
We'll wait to find out in the coming days. But of course, one party that was also was conspicuously missing at that meeting was the SDP. You know, I don't know if the SDP is a small party or not, but we're not going to be talking about that. But we have a guest in the studio who will be doing justice to the topic: 2023 elections, Nigeria and the pact with destiny. We have the vice presidential candidate of Social Democratic Party.
ADC.
ADC.
African Democratic Party.
African Democratic Party, I beg your pardon, that was a typo on my behalf there. And Ahmed Buhari is our guest today. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, sir. Good to be here.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. I think there's too much fixation on the two major political parties that we almost forget that other political parties exist. The name of the party is the African Democratic Congress. Yeah. It turns 20 next year.
Amazing.
Yes.
To think that you've been around for this long, and the usual cliche, you know, small parties, big parties. I mean, should we even have that in the first instance?
No, I think it's a narrative that the political space sort of projects. But in truth, I think we would have to respect the fact that membership in a political party would almost signify its greatness. Also, the number of political offices that you have been able to win at the polls would also translate to that. With regard to the African Democratic Congress, in the last few years, it has been able to, you know, electively get people into offices at state assembly level and House of Representative level. One of the things that hasn't given the party that full-blown recognition, I guess, is the fact that it has never won a gubernatorial seat. So again, I think it's work in progress. I think we're not doing badly. But I think more than anything else, people should believe in themselves, especially on the mandates they're pushing forward to the people.
All right.
So you're hoping for more awareness?
Yeah, the party has never been this formidable. From the history that we know about the party, it has never been this formidable when it comes to people who have presented themselves to run for elective offices across board. Now we're talking about serious people who truly want to win. And then we've been working very tirelessly with the National Working Committee to make them understand that it is not going to be business as usual. We have people who truly want to get to the finish line and win elective positions. We have also seen state chairmen who for the first time know that their true victory would rely on the fact that people within their jurisdictions actually, you know, eventually emerge as candidates.
Okay, let's look at two major events that happened in the polity that has gotten a lot of people asking the question: are indeed Nigerians serious about, because we've heard so much talk about youth rise, returning Nigeria back to young people and all of that. But then a major event happened last week at the NBA convention. We had debates by members of some of these political parties. But at the end of the day, what for some people may seem as a triviality was what was making the rounds, and not even the core of what these people or these individuals spoke about. So we begin to ask the question, are we really ready for issue-based politics, as it were?
Well, you see, the generation has been made to feel as though, to a large extent, that we do not have anything to offer. So even when you belong to that generation and you to speak a different language and you say, oh, look, we can do this, everybody looks at you like, are you joking? Have you been approved? Have you been endorsed? Has somebody blessed you? And these blessings that they're looking forward to are blessings that are supposed to come from the supposedly old politicians that everybody complains about every day. I'll start with the NBA. Yes, indeed, the NBA invited different political parties. And when we found out that they had invited political parties, we now realized that they actually only invited the political parties that had presented people who had been in office before or who were old. And then so there were some protests from some corners saying there are other political parties. Why do you just have 3 or 4? Why don't you bring back, why do you just have 3? Why don't you bring some new people who, so that the Nigerian people can hear a different story, at least for the first time? And so reluctantly, they said, okay, those older ones will be on stage and get 10 minutes to speak, and then the younger ones will come and just speak for 5 minutes and disperse. Again, this is the NBA. This is the first and most foremost body that interrogates injustice. But even the setup from here is being laid on injustice, because obviously you are saying all these people are running the same race, but you guys can have a head start while these other ones come behind. I found that very unacceptable. But scratch that. I think most of the trivialities you're talking about will have to do with the way some people were dressed or the way some people looked. Again, this is how we have managed to shift ourselves from the basics, which has to do with what you're offering. You know, so again, there were other candidates there who spoke about very important things, but nobody was talking about that. We were now still focused on the 3 main political parties, and that is because deep down inside our subconscious, the other ones can't do anything. But those other ones are speaking the language we believe can help get us out of the quagmire that we have found ourselves. So it's a very, very dicey situation with the Nigerian space. I'll give you a quick story. I followed my friend to this church where his uncle was the pastor, and they had just finished the church's annual election season, where they will have different positions: junior pastor, social this and all of that, and youth leader. And after the elections results came out, it so happened that the pastor was surprised because young people contested across board, and the church was really loaded with a lot of young people. So he was hoping that the new outlook for the church would be a younger outlook. But when the results came out, the only seats that young people won in the entire list of available offices was youth leader. And even the youth leader,
which is cliche, actually.
Which is cliche. So young people in their minds are thinking, the only one that is supposed to be for us is the youth leader position. He said, as a matter of fact, that if older people had contested for that youth leader position, he believes they would have won. So again, we need to talk to ourselves. We need to let ourselves believe that we have something to offer. When you move away from the polity and look at the private sector, every person heading every major institution is young. In most cases right now, they are under 50. Some of them are in their 45s. And you'll be surprised at how much innovations they are bringing in and how much they're bringing in true value to those institutions. Look at the NBA, for example. For the first time in the history of the NBA, it produced a president that was neither a son nor a bar lawyer. He was a commercial lawyer, and he was in his mid-40s.
But he's actually the outgoing NBA chairman.
Yes, he won, and now if you look at the NBA, it has a different outlook. They just appeal. And I'm saying it to everybody, there is no way we're going to move from where we are if we're not prepared to try something different. Otherwise, we'll just be deceiving ourselves.
Now, you faulted the justice system, that's during the debate. Don't you think we can attribute this to the inability to get to the finish line, just like you mentioned? Because we've had scenarios where minor parties or minority party members or presidential candidates actually, towards the deadline, they merge with major political parties, which obviously we're going to see within the next 3 or 2 months. Won't you attribute this to the inability of not being able to get to the finish line?
Even major political parties do this. In the political space, it is about alliances, realignments, and stuff like that. That is what politics is all about. I'll give you an example. Aminu Tambuwal, the governor of Sokoto State, at the convention for the primaries in the PDP, stood up and said he was going to be supporting another candidate. You know, and the whole world felt, oh, great, he did it because he felt that was the best political calculation. If a younger person had done that, we'll be talking about it till today like he did the biggest thing.
But that's same party. We're talking about same party.
I'm telling you about the same things. So if you move on, you will see that as we go closer to 2023 election, some major people from the APC will probably go and support people in the PDP. Some major people from the PDP will probably go and support people in the APC, and everybody's going to celebrate it. But if a younger person does it, it's going to be seen as a sin. But again, people must understand the polity. Last election, there were about 77 political presidential candidates. There were 77 presidential candidates, and out of that number, there were people who stood to the finish line, who indeed were of smaller parties, so to speak. But guess how many people voted for smaller parties collectively? So if you remove APC and PDP, we have about 75 political parties, right, remaining, or presidential candidates remaining. I'm sure you have forgotten the figure. It was 325,000. So I'm telling you, people like Kingsley Moghalu, Fela Duroto, Shaw, and all of the big names that we had around the space were only able to muster about 324,000 votes collectively, while the other two big parties were able to pull about 29 million votes. Again, this is something there's something wrong with the way we think as a generation of people, and you will not blame us too much. We are dealing with people who have been in the media space for about 40 years, 50 years. Subconsciously, we idolize them. Subconsciously, we worship them. We don't even realize that we do so. So we take a conscious effort to help rebuild our confidence that indeed, this generation can actually salvage itself.
Now, we're looking at a path with destiny. And for some people, they have painted a gloomy future if things do not work out the way they have envisaged and all of that. But then going by what you just said, looking at the fact that just a very negligible number of people voted for this quality, these big names, and these are technocrats, people would like to ascribe to them most of the time. Do you see that changing in 2023? Because yes, we have lesser number of political parties right now. People can readily remember the name of some of the presidential candidates, but do we see that changing, or is it going to be status quo?
A lot has to do with structure. A lot has to do with young people across board, because what you see now is indeed there's a new euphoria. And a lot of people will say, oh, I like what the ADC is doing, I like what the LP party is doing, I like what the SDP is doing, which for me are the three smaller parties that seem to be rearing their heads around those major political parties. Yeah. But again, when you look at it critically, you will now see that the spread of acceptability are still, tied to regions. And this is very crucial if victory has got to be, experienced next year. What I'm trying to say is, when you look at a political party or political party's candidates, and then you're trying to get his acceptance activated in certain parts of the country, and it is not happening, it's almost telling you or giving you a sign that we may see that reflect at the polls. And I understand that people are excited about all that is happening, but I think that we haven't done the homework properly. So I'll give you an example. The possibility of these smaller parties deciding to come together to create that, pockets of support groups from different regions, only so that maybe one of them might emerge eventually, is what can actually change the game. But is there willingness amongst these people to find a cause or a reason to want to align before the deadline? Not forgetting that we have a lot of young people who feel do not align with anything. We're taking this to the end. But the failure is that we all sit down in our father's farms and we think it's the biggest space that exists. When you go out, you go and call other people's names, and they've never been heard of before. So it's a lot of work to be done.
While we talk about major political parties, minor, parties, do you think Nigeria is ripe for independent candidacy?
Well, I think Nigeria is right for anything that is going to give us the success that we
Because we're not seeing that even.
we really want. But again, what you have just requested for has to do with the Electoral Act, and the Electoral Act didn't capture that. So again, it's far-fetched. Unless the Electoral Act captures it, that is when you now see the true desire of the people
The
saying
constitution that was amended actually did.
it did what?
Independent candidacy, it did. But we're not seeing anybody coming out to that effect.
It's almost it's difficult because the cost of running as an independent candidate is really hard. You know, we have about 774 local governments. You need to be present. If not anything, even if it's a room in every local government, you should have, so that the people will feel your presence. You know, you would have to look for delegates, about 3,000 plus delegates.
So it's cost effective.
That will be an agent that will be at your polling unit to protect your mandates. I don't know how. It's going to be tough, but it is possible, and the only thing that's going to make it possible is if Nigerians start paying for the democracy that they want. So I've been saying something for a long time. I said anytime a politician puts his hand in his pocket to pay for a democratic process, be sure that when he gets into office, he's going to recoup all of that money at an interest rate that only he can determine. So again, for people in political parties that are complaining about delegates getting money during primaries, it's going to keep happening. These are the people that you have, the structure has designed to decide the future of a political party's candidates, and they're not being paid in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4, and then you come to year 5 and you think they're going to ask for something. They don't think they're going to ask for something. So unless members of political parties decide with themselves, I'm going to agree to pay those dues, even if it is 100 naira, even if it is 200 naira, I pay my regular dues, because those dues are what will now be used to run the affairs of the party. Something has got to give. Are we prepared?
All right. So
He talked about alliance. Yeah, alliance, and you give the scenario of Tamboa, Secretary of State Governor. So are we also seeing your party also going into alliance?
No, we don't have any plan to have any alliance. So I represent the African Democratic Congress. I'm the vice presidential candidate, and my presidential candidate, Mr. Dumebi Kachiku, on no account has he posed any inkling that he intends to have any alliance. But as a politician, I see all of these things, and I'm saying to myself, before party, before my individual self, my country comes first. And if that comes first, what must we do to help salvage this problem? Because it affects everybody. If Nigeria was working right, I probably would still be having my Saturday morning sleep right now. But you see, these are the sacrifices that we have pushed ourselves forward to.
So in other words, you're not striking out the possibility of an alliance in the future?
No, what I said is there's no talk of any alliance.
But there's possibility.
I say there's no talk of any alliance.
Okay, let's move on. Looking at the campaigns, which will be starting up probably the 3rd week of September, Nigerians, I asked you a question earlier on, and of course you gave me an answer to that effect, but then Nigerians, some quarters of Nigerians expect campaigns to be issue-based and not the usual theatrics that come with campaigns of insults and all of that. Nigerians want to see something different. So what are the issues that should Nigerians be looking at? What should we expect presidential candidates? What questions should we ask of our presidential candidates as we go into the campaigns in September?
First of all, we should look at good track records, because politicians are very good with words. We will come here and we'll tell you what you want to hear. But then after what you want to hear, which obviously will come out from our mouths.
Have you seen a bit of that already?
Oh, yes. After what you want to hear, based on what comes out of our mouths, the second thing you should be asking is, how will that happen? Where will you get the money? Where will you get the cooperation? Where will you get the manpower? I've heard a lot of people speak about big figures and numbers and all of that, but they make them in comparison with some other climes, other countries that have, sort of resolved some of their problems, and we use that as a yardstick to determine how ours would unfold. But you see, I keep saying one thing here. No matter the business model you bring to, say, Nyanya, to help the Nyanya market space bloom, that market strategy will not work in Eketekpene. That market strategy might not work in Yola. That is because there are peculiarities in all of these places.
Yeah.
So when you look back in our history and you see the successes of the military boys, they were in their 20s and 30s, but they obtained some of the biggest challenges that Nigerians are facing today. And that is because they used homegrown solutions to solve homegrown problems. Most of the people in their cabinet were Nigerian professors from Nigerian universities. Now what we're having is we quickly get into office and we're looking for the best around the world to come and help solve our problems. Now those guys might have been successful in Switzerland and New York and Harvard or whatever, but when they come here, the challenges are unique. This is what I think we'll have to do. We have to look at the bedrock of the problem. The bedrock of the Nigerian problem is the civil service. The civil service, I call it the bedrock because everything that comes out of the country, the country's plans, come out from the ministries, come out from the plans of the secretary to the government of the federation in conjunction with the executive to see how it will trickle down through the ministries and get to the Nigerian people. Now the civil service has got a big problem. Its biggest problem is it feels it's underpaid. It feels it's been neglected. And the only thing that they have thought about that can help them get out of this problem is how they can start demanding for 30% increment in their salaries so that they can cushion some of the inadequacies that happen to their lifestyle. The moment they start asking for 30% increments, the market woman is already hearing. And if you were selling a Mudu of Gari for 100 naira, she starts thinking how to sell it for 130 naira. So you get the 30% increment, you hit the market, and it's still the same level. And then inflation has happened, and people who do not have access to that 30% are now struggling to not just eat, but when they can't find the food to eat, they start looking for who to eat. And that is why you see all of this nonsense going on with the banditry and the terrorism. How can we help the civil service? I think we would have to look at a welfare-based over a salary increase base. What stops a civil servant from having access to housing the first day he signs up into the civil service? What stops the civil servant from having free education or accessible education for his children in such a way that no civil servant's child will be chased away from public schools ever? So that the civil servant know that in my 35 years of service or the 60 years I'm going to be retiring, whichever comes first, I know that my child's education is going to be protected. I know that my housing is protected. I know that my health care is protected. I know that I can also get some other incentives when I go to shop in stores. I demand for a receipt, and at the end of the year, if I submit all my receipts to the tax the tax institute, I'm able to get my tax rebates. So you will see civil servants at the end of the year getting like 300,000 naira extra money from just tax rebates, only because I'm a civil servant. Now, by the time we are able to, put around the civil servant's life with all of these things that he would naturally want to spend money on, at that point, he doesn't have to steal.
But at the end of the day, civil servants do not, when you look at the total percentage of workforce, I may not have that readily available, but they don't even constitute up to 30%.
So if you come back to what I said from the beginning, I said bedrock. That is where everything filters out. So why there's a big problem is you and I, who are Nigerians, will naturally go to the Ministry of Works tomorrow because we've got the qualification and then we want to take on some jobs that have been advertised. And then we bid and then we get it, and then the civil service, people in the civil service tell us we have to bring about, in fact, when you submit it, they were like, go and mark it up because it's too low for us to share whatever is on top of it. And so you go mark it up, and we've seen people who at the end of the day make like 2 to 3% of the entire profit of whatever jobs they do with the government. Now, why this is a problem is because this is exactly how we overbloat the budget, because we want to accommodate excesses of some individuals that are greedy. And I am saying that the only thing that can stop this is when you bring the Patriot Act that we have designed. The Maybe campaign organization has designed a Patriot Act that it calls, the Patriot Act clearly states that everything we produce in Nigeria will be fed by Nigerians first, and most importantly, you cannot be a government staff or a beneficiary of government and not ensure that your children's school here, not ensure that you use the hospitals here. You cannot use any kind of police protection, but you can actually decide not to use any of these things. if you decide not to do any of those things, you don't have to be in government.
All right, but
you don't have to be in the ministry.
But hopefully we'll get into all of those details maybe sometime in September.
No,
we can come and talk about.
The reason why I'm saying this is because I think it's important for us to understand that we keep talking about all of these things, but we have not been able to mop up how these monies will come out, and we've not been able to mop up how the people that will protect this from happening will be talked about. This civil service I'm talking about is the crucial element of all of these discussions. And then when you now move away from that, you now look at agriculture, for example, and you say, oh, what's happening with agriculture? As we speak right now, the country is actually spending $5 billion on importing agricultural produce. Out of that $5 billion, $1.5 billion is just for dairy products. What I mean by dairy products, anything around milk.
Yeah.
In a country that has millions of cattle, simply because we've not been able to tell the people that indeed we can put your cattle in a place and we can extract the milk and we can make more money bigger than you have ever imagined.
So you are big on ranching, right?
I'm big on ranching. I've always supported ranching. And for whatever anybody has said about whether ruga is a good idea or not, rural grazing areas are not a bad thing. But I would have expected that governors who are struggling to meet up with internally generated revenue would have been the first to say, bring it to my state. I have this expanse of land, let's do it here. Bring all the investors who wants to take care of dairy farms to be there, who wants to take their feces to take it for power generation, who wants to take the skin, can take it and put it together, process them, and we don't have to send all of those skins to Louis Vuitton in France. We can actually process all of those things here. Who wants to be able to dice this meat in a way? Because as I tell you, we might have millions of cattle around, but we can't even export them because we do not meet the global standard for exportation of all of those kind of things. These things have got to be structured in a way that makes sense. And the worst part of it all is when this government, for example, did something, because I will always say the truth, they came up with this whole idea of Fulani radio, and a lot of people were against it. Oh, how can I have Fulani radio? How can you spend government money on Fulani radio? But the truth of the matter is that we needed that Fulani radio to help communicate with some people that we cannot get in classrooms, to help communicate with some people that cannot come to our town hall meetings, to help communicate with some people that do not have electricity to even watch TV. But they have some radios stuck to their ears where we will speak to them in the language they can understand and let them see the economic benefit of why we want them to have a collective ranching system, because it's going to improve their economic livelihood. But I think we're too emotional, we're too sentimental, and sometimes we allow this thing just fizzle away.
So as we be to round up,
let me ask this final
Please go.
question. You've talked about civil service. And we all know the federal government is also thinking about cutting size just to save cost. Will you support expansion and make them productive, or you are towing the same line with the federal government?
First of all, support what would help us save a lot of money. The government will be running away from the civil service structure, which I believe a lot of people are not functional as we would want. But I think that the government must be more concerned about what we can do to, support other sectors. And so if the civil service, the way it is right now, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to cut down the size. You just have to get these people sufficiently activated in a way that they're not just sitting in the office. Some big ministries just have about 4 or 5 people functioning in those offices, and that is because there's no proper structure in place that will give accountability, transparency, efficiency, and good governance. And then the biggest problem in all of this is that when you talk about all of these things, people keep forgetting the mere fact that data management systems are missing in all of the things that we do. As we speak with you right now, in a country like Nigeria that we're dealing with so much insecurity, there are still people on the road that are walking by that even if you stop them, they do not have any sort of identification to prove to you that they're Nigerians. We've had series and series and series of data collection processes that still does not, make the policeman or the security agent that stops you on the road to say, what's your identification number? And it punches it, even if you don't have a card with you, it punches it into a device, and your name and your face pops up and it says, okay, you can keep moving. Because we're dealing with so many elements. I keep telling you, people come into this country on a daily basis in thousands with the intention not to return to where they came from. And these people get mixed up in the system. They get tied up with the fact that they cannot have any economic benefits, and then they start turning into survival mode, which has to do with anything they can possibly do to subject the Nigerian people.
Lastly, I have to just ask this question. Maybe you answer this in just a minute. We've seen a rise. We saw a rise in the registration process, PVCs and what have you, and we've always dealt with the issue of voter apathy.
Right.
All right, looking at previous elections. What do you think is going to be the attitude of voters going into the 2023 elections quickly before roundup?
My prayer and hope is that the alacrity that we saw them activate, we saw young people activate to get voters card, will be the same alacrity that we will see them on election day going to vote at the polls. Because already, don't forget that we have about 70 million registered voters before the 2019 election, and we only had about 30 million of them appearing. So let's hope that these new registered voters would also be keen and interested and eager to also cast their votes on election day.
All right, so on that note,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed Buhari, the Vice Presidential candidate of ADC, African Democratic Congress Party, for coming on the program this morning. Yes, we'll go on a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be taking our discussions further. Stick around.